Good evening. You're watching the News at 6 with me, Ishan Russell. The News at 6 is all about the day's biggest developing stories, and we'll be filling in on them over the next half hour. But first, the headlines that we're tracking right now. Raids conducted on homes of suspected Islamist militants across France. Belgian suspect identified as the mastermind of the Friday attacks in Paris. In Syria, French fighter jets launched their biggest raid so far. Islamic State stronghold Raqqa city is targeted. President Pranab Mukherjee advises literary icons to use debate in their protest against intolerance, urges them not to return awards by letting emotions overrun reason. WPI inflation in the negative territory for the 12th month in a row. Prices of pulses and onions show increase of over 50% in October. And noted Bollywood personality Sai Jafri, who acted in Shatranj Ke Khiladi, passes away at the age of 86. Well, a top story this evening, French fighter jets launched their biggest raids in Syria to date, targeting the Islamic State stronghold in Raqqa since Sunday. The strikes came just 2 days after the group claimed responsibility for the coordinated attacks in Paris that killed at least 129.
In its first airstrike against the Islamic State since the string of deadly Paris attacks claimed by the jihadist group, 12 warplanes, including 10 fighter bombers, dropped 20 bombs on targets in Syria. The planes left from Jordan and the UAE, and the operation was conducted in coordination with American forces.
La France a toujours dit que dans la mesure où elle était non seulement menacée mais attaquée par Daesh, il était tout à fait normal qu'elle prenne le devant et que dans le cadre de la légitime défense.
The airstrikes were launched on the opening day of the G20 summit in Turkey, where world leaders in a draft statement raised the alarm over an escalating international movement of foreign terrorist fighters.
恐怖主义是人类面临的共同挑战，中国是恐怖主义的受害方，也是国际反恐行动的重要参与方。
In France, police raided homes of suspected Islamist militants across the country in the aftermath of the Paris shootings. Reports suggested that authorities conducted at least 110 house searches. French Prime Minister Manuel Valls warned of potential further attacks.
Et que le terrorisme peut frapper, a frappé, même si nous avons évité de nombreux attentats, peut frapper et peut frapper de nouveau.
Ces jours-ci ?
Ces jours-ci, dans les jours qui viennent, dans les semaines qui viennent, je ne dis pas cela pour faire peur.
At least 129 people were killed and several others injured in a series of attacks across Paris on Friday. French President François Hollande called it an act of war by Islamic State and vowed to punish all those who were involved. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Now, the G20 summit in Turkey, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a case for a global response to combat terror. He said terror strikes extract not only a human but a huge economic price as well. Modi underscored the growing need for a concerted effort to tackle terror during the BRICS summit on the sidelines of the G20.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made a case for a united global effort to combat terrorism. Speaking at the BRICS summit that's being held on the sidelines of the G20 summit at Antalya in Turkey, Modi said that combating terror will be top priority for BRICS.
The entire humanity must stand together as one against terrorism. The need for a united global effort to combat terrorism had never been more urgent. This must also be a priority for BRICS nations.
The Prime Minister continued his stress on the need for a global response to terror during his intervention at the G20 summit, where leaders of the top 20 economies of the world have converged. While the thrust of the meeting this time was inclusive economic growth and climate change, the terror attacks in Paris took center stage. Modi said, and I quote, We are united in condemning the barbaric attacks in Paris this week and the recent bombings in Ankara and Lebanon. We share the sorrow of Russia for the lost lives in the fallen aircraft in Sinai. These alone are stark reminders of the dark forces we face, larger than specific groups and particular targets and territories. It is a major global challenge of our times. It not only takes a tragic toll of lives, it also extracts a huge economic cost and threatens our way of life. It calls for a comprehensive global response. Combating it must be a major priority for G20. A resolution on terror is expected at the G20 summit. The declaration may seek quicker implementation of the Financial Action Task Force recommendations that seek to stop individuals sending money to groups like ISIS and tackle the black market for oil that is seen as being key to their funding. It also plans to prevent terrorists from exploiting technology, communications and resources to incite terrorist acts, including through the internet. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And we're joined by Dr. Raghuvansh Sinha, Deputy News Editor at the Hindustan Times. To help us understand, Raghuvansh, as far as what the Prime Minister said, as far as the global concerted effort to fight terror, India has been saying this for some time now. In fact, we've been trying to sponsor a document in the UN of how to define the term terror itself so that the world can sort of define it and take action on it.
Yeah, that is actually the root cause of the problem. Today, people are looking at the global phenomena of terrorism from their own perspective. But India has been, over the last 30 years, reminding the international community that there has to be a global fight against this menace. And to begin with, India has been reminding the international community repeatedly that unless we don't agree on the definition of terrorism, today this definition, this issue is lying with the United Nations for several years. They have not been able to even agree on what is terrorism, and we are giving or leaving out enough space for people to make it someone else's terrorist, someone else's freedom fighter. And so India has repeatedly pointed out that first and foremost, it has to be a global fight. But before it is a global fight, we have to agree on the basic definition of what is global terrorism.
All right, but as far as India's role now from here on is concerned, I mean, we've seen India sort of re-emerge in the global scale as a strong diplomatic force, as a force that really commands a bloc and as the rising power. How do you see India playing a role in this sort of global concerted effort that is now being talked about in the near future? Because as far as the Middle East and other such touch points or flashpoints are concerned, India has had a slightly different point of view towards, such as the Western powers.
Well, India has been raising this issue for several years. We have been pinpointing that the Afghan-Pakistan border is the root cause of, is the hub of international terrorism. The terrorists are being exported from here to different parts of the world. India is also raising several new angles to this terrorism. We have seen how Prime Minister Modi, during his address to the G20, he also raised the issue of cybercrime. You see, international terrorism is highly linked to cybercrime. They are also linked to the transfer of money. We need to stop funding to this international terrorist organization. So India has been calling for a global perspective, which includes stopping funding for these terrorist organizations, strengthening international cybercrime laws, as well as having a global approach to tackle the issue of terrorism.
All right, one final word, Raghuvansh. As far as a global effort to tackle terror is concerned, now we've seen France doing the retaliatory act already, but in terms of really moving forward on addressing the issue of terrorism and addressing the root causes of it, do you see enough action? Because there's a lot of words that have been said over the weekend since that horrific day in Paris on Friday, but not much in terms of real consensus has come out, has it?
Actually, that is the concern that we have, that while people come together, they pledge global support. Even when you look at the communique that is being finalized at G20, they are all pledging to come together and fight international terrorism. But there are not too many details. We don't know what kind of coordination they want. Even today, the European Union leaders, they are asking Putin not to attack this particular group, not to attack that particular group. I think unless we don't get away from these kind of partition politics over the fight to terrorism, we will not be able to fight it, number one. Then we also have to fight at the ideological level. Right. IS is not only about military prowess. We see that they are attracting youths from all over the world. In fact, most of these international terrorist activities that are taking place are by people who are returning back from Syria, whether it is from the, people who are coming from the Western countries or whether from some of the developed countries. We need to spread awareness. We need to keep a constant check on people who are going to these countries and keeping an eye. So it has to be a global response and multifaceted approach. It cannot be only military, because more than 1 year of bombing IS, we have seen that they have not lost any territory. They continue to hold territory.
Right.
So unless we don't put soldiers on the ground, we don't have a coordinated global response, and if we don't have a multifaceted approach, we will not be able to deal with this menace.
All right, Raghuvan Sinha, we'll have to leave it over there, but thank you very much for coming in and helping us understand what the implications as far as terror and the conversation that global leaders are having about it as well. On that note, we'll slip into a very quick break. On the other side, heavy rains have wrought havoc in Tamil Nadu. 11 NDRF teams rushed to the state. That and much more when we return.
Get live Rajya Sabha session. News, views, reports and analysis you can trust on social media. Subscribe, follow, like Rajya Sabha Television.
Welcome back. You're watching the news at 6. Now, after making his interventions on the raging debate on intolerance, President Pranab Mukherjee called on intellectuals to resolve matters through debate and discussion. He urged writers and filmmakers not to return awards but cherish the recognition.
President Pranab Mukherjee reminded literary icons and artists who are returning their awards in protest against growing intolerance that they should not let their emotions overrun reason and that disagreement must be expressed through debate and discussion.
Awards should be cherished and valued by those who receive them. Sensitive minds sometimes get disturbed by some incidents in society, but expression of concern over such events should be balanced.
President Mukherjee made his address after inaugurating the National Press Day celebrations organized by the Press Council of India. He also gave away national awards for excellence in journalism on the occasion.
The power of the media should be used to reset our moral compasses and promote liberalism, humanism, and decency in public life.
Meanwhile, Minister of State General V.K. Singh was embroiled in yet another controversy when he said that intolerance in India is an unnecessary creation of very imaginative minds being paid with a lot of money. He further asserted that it was a politically motivated move before the Bihar polls. Opposition leaders were quick to react and criticize V.K. Singh for his remark. Janata Dal United President Sharad Yadav asked the BJP top brass to take action against the minister for repeatedly making such controversial statements.
और रोज ये कोई ना कोई बुरी बात बोलता है आदमी, यानी हिंदुस्तान में जो फौज है उसके जनरल ने इतना को भी उपद्रव नहीं किया होगा जिस तरह इसने किया, और ये यहाँ भी इसको ले लिया इन लोगों ने. रोज ये कोई ना कोई ऐसी बात कहता है फिर पलटता है, और मैं कहूँगा कि बीजेपी इसकी जबान बंद करे.
At least 75 members of the intelligentsia have returned awards in an escalation of protests by writers, historians, filmmakers and scientists who are growing intolerance, voicing fears that the country is being ruined in the current atmosphere. The BJP-led government has dismissed the protest as manufactured rebellion and politically motivated. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Now, the wholesale price index for October edged up to minus 3.81% against minus 4.54% in September. Food prices rose 2.44% as compared to the corresponding period a year ago. Pulses and onions among the food items category turned dearer, with inflation at 52.98% and 85.66% respectively in October. This is the 12th month in a row when the inflation at wholesale level remained negative. The Supreme Court today rejected the Delhi government's petition seeking death penalty for the killers of Nitish Katara. It will decide next on whether the Yadav brothers should remain in jail for life or not.
The Supreme Court has allowed the business executive Nitish Katara's killers Vikas and Vishal Yadav escape death penalty. The two, along with the third convict Sukhdev Pahalwan, are currently serving 30 years jail term for the murder in 2002. The bench rejected the Delhi government's plea seeking death for the convicts.
दिल्ली गवर्नमेंट ने एक एसएलपी फाइल की थी. उन्होंने एसएलपी जो फाइल की थी उनका ये कहना था कि जो सजा हाई कोर्ट ने दी है वो कम है, उसको बढ़ाया जाए. तो उन्होंने ये भी कहा था कि सजा को फांसी में बरकरार किया जाए या फिर सजा को लाइफ टर्म के लिए, कंप्लीट लाइफ टर्म के लिए बोला जाए. लेकिन माननीय सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने उस दलील को खारिज कर दिया है.
The court has deferred the final hearing in the case for next year. However, it will be needing the assistance of Delhi government's lawyer in deciding the petitions filed by the three convicts as to whether their life term should be for 30 years or till death.
इस पे ये सुनवाई होगी कि सजा जो है वो कितनी हो, डेथ ना हो, मगर लाइफ एज लाइफ 14 साल से लेके या जैसे अभी है 30 साल से लेके पूरी लाइफ तक की दी जा सकती है. इस बात पर कोर्ट विचार करेगा.
Last month, the Supreme Court had rejected the plea of Neelam Katara seeking death for the convicts. In August this year, the top court upheld the conviction of all three convicts. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The northeast monsoon continued to wreak havoc in Tamil Nadu with rains pounding the northern coastal districts. The death toll from the rain-related incidents has now gone up to 71. The Met Office has forecast heavy downpour in the next 3 days in Puducherry and coastal Andhra Pradesh as well.
Normal life was affected in Tamil Nadu as heavy rains flooded suburbs and residential colonies in low-lying areas. Chennai received 27 centimeters of rainfall and saw boats coming out on flooded roads. The district administration declared a holiday for schools and colleges.
மழை வெள்ளத்துல 10 நாளா மழை வந்ததால ஒரே தண்ணி வந்து இந்த சாக்கடை தண்ணியும் சேர்ந்து வரதால வீடு எல்லாம் மூழ்கி போச்சு. மக்கள் ரொம்ப அவதிப்படுறாங்க. குழந்தை குட்டிலாம் வந்து ரொம்ப கஷ்டப்படுறாங்க. அதுக்கு கவர்மெண்ட் யாருமே இந்த கட்சிக்காரங்க யாருமே வந்து கூட பார்க்கல. அவங்க ஒரு சாப்பாடு உணவு வேற எதுவுமே தரவே இல்லை, தண்ணி கூட.
The rains were caused by a low pressure region over the southwest Bay of Bengal of Tamil Nadu. It's likely to move northwestwards towards North Tamil Nadu coast. The weathermen forecast widespread rain over Tamil Nadu and neighbouring Puducherry in the coming week.
It is likely to rain at many places in the northern districts.
We have to revive our links with the masses.
World-class healthcare is available to only a handful of people in this country.
Causing controversies.
A lot of leaders today think that they rule by divine right.
Now, media has become manageable.
Watch RSTV engage personalities to the point. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m., Thursday, 1:30 and 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching the news at 6. Now, United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is likely to visit North Korea this week. South Korean news agency Yonhap reported that Moon will be visiting Pyongyang for a possible meeting with Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The trip comes 6 months after Pyongyang cancelled a last-minute invitation to to visit a factory park in Kaesong City. This will be the first time that any UN chief will be visiting North Korea in over 2 decades. No exact date has, however, been specified. North Korea is facing heavy UN, EU and US sanctions for its nuclear tests. It's hoped that Ban's visit will bolster efforts to resolve the North Korean nuclear standoff. Time for all the other international news stories in Global Buzz. Japan's economy has fallen into recession once again after its GDP shrank to 0.8% on an annualized basis in the third quarter. Growth fell to 0.2% on a quarterly basis in the third quarter, weaker than the forecast of a 0.1% decline. Japan has been in recession 4 times since the global financial crisis. Economists said the weak data will put more pressure on the government and the central bank to continue to stimulate the economy. Australia's Immigration Minister Peter Dutton rejected an MP's call to close its borders for refugees from the Middle East after the Paris attack. Andrew Fraser, a Conservative MP, made this call on Facebook, saying Australia doesn't need Middle Eastern refugees or Islamic boat people. Dutton said Australia will not back away from its decision to accept 12,000 refugees from Syria and Iraq. The death toll due to a landslide in China has now risen to 25, and more than 2,000 rescuers are still searching for survivors. The landslide took place on Friday due to a torrent of mud and rocks unleashed by heavy rains that buried 30 homes in Lidong village in the Zhejiang province. 12 people are still missing. Time now for all the sports action in Sports Beat. The third day's play of the second test between India and South Africa was also called off without a single ball being bowled as the rain continued to play spoil sport. Day 2 was also lost due to persistent rains. Shikhar Dhawan and Murali Vijay Yadav at the crease at 80 for no loss in reply to South Africa's first innings score of 214 on day 1. On day 4, Australia took a 193-run lead in the second test match against New Zealand with Adam Vogue's 101 and Stephen Smith's 131. Australia managed to build a strong partnership as they were on 258 with 8 wickets remaining in their second innings. Earlier, New Zealand managed to add 114 runs to their overnight total and were bowled out for 624. Top seeds Andy Murray and Rafael Nadal will be in action at the ATP World Tour Finals. Britain's Andy Murray will take on Spanish David Ferrer in the first round-robin match. Murray defeated Ferrer in Paris Masters last week and will look to make it through to the ATP World Tour Finals after a woeful performance last year. While Spaniard Rafael Nadal will face Swiss tennis star Stan Wawrinka in the other game. Well, that's all from us. Goodbye.